I was reviewing the final proofs of my third book when my phone rang. Dad's name flashed on the screen. I answered on the second ring. "Sarah, sweetheart," he said, using that careful tone I'd learned to recognize over the years. The one that meant he wanted something, or was about to deliver bad news. "Hi, Dad. How are you?" "Good, good. Listen, I wanted to talk to you about the retirement party." I smiled, setting down my red pen. "Of course. I already requested time off. June 15th, right? I wouldn't miss it." There was a pause. Too long. My smile faded. "That's actually what I wanted to discuss," he said. "Your mother and I have been thinking, and well, we're wondering if maybe it would be better if you sat this one out." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Sit it out?" "It's just that there will be a lot of my colleagues there. Partners from the firm, clients, some pretty important people from Wall Street. They'll be asking questions, you know how it is. What everyone's doing, career talk, that sort of thing. And," he sighed, "Sarah, you know we love what you do. Teaching is noble work. But when Richard Steinberg asks what my daughter does for a living, and I say you're a teacher making $60,000 a year." He trailed off. I closed my eyes. "You're embarrassed." "That's not the word I'd use. It's just, your sister just made partner at Cabot and Williams. Your brother's startup is about to IPO. And you're still, well, grading papers?" "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." I kept my voice even. "What exactly are you asking me to do? Maybe you could say you're busy. A conference or something. That way it doesn't look like we're excluding you, and I don't have to explain why my oldest daughter chose to be a school teacher when she graduated from Yale." The words hit like a slap, but I'd had years of practice keeping my face neutral, my voice steady. "You don't survive in academia without developing thick skin. I graduated from Yale 18 years ago, Dad. I'm not in a classroom anymore. Well, whatever you're doing now, it's still education, right? Still teaching?" I looked at the manuscript on my desk. "Transforming Literacy in America, a Framework for the 21st Century." Read the title page. The contract with Oxford University Press sat beneath it. I thought about the email I'd received that morning from the Secretary of Education, thanking me for my policy recommendations. I thought about the $50 million grant I'd just secured from the Gates Foundation. "Yes," I said quietly. "Still teaching. Then you understand. Look, we'll do something just us, okay? Dinner next month. But for the party, maybe it's better if you're unavailable." I felt something inside me make a decision. A clean break, like ice cracking. "I understand perfectly, Dad. I'll send flowers." "You're not upset." "Why would I be upset?" I kept my tone light. "I'm just a teacher. I'm sure I have papers to grade anyway." After we hung up, I sat in my office at Harvard, looking out at the yard. Students crossed the green, hurrying to classes. My name was on the door, Dr. Sarah Chen, Associate Professor of Education. Soon, it would read Dean. In 3 days, the university was announcing my appointment as the youngest dean of the Graduate School of Education in Harvard's history. I'd been sitting on that news for 2 weeks, waiting for the official press release. I'd planned to tell my family at Dad's party, imagined their faces when they realized where I actually worked, what I actually did. Now, I pulled out my phone and sent a text to the university's communications office. "Proceed with the announcement as planned. No embargo." My assistant knocked. "Dr. Chen? Your 2 o'clock is here. The documentary crew from PBS?" I smiled. "Send them in." The next 3 days passed in a blur of final manuscript edits, meetings with the transition team, and a long call with Michelle Obama's office about the literacy initiative we were co-chairing. I didn't call my family. They didn't call me. On the morning of June 12th, I woke to 47 missed calls. I made coffee first, took my time. I knew what had happened. The Harvard press release had gone out at 6 a.m. Eastern. By now, it would have been picked up by the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg. They'd loved the narrative: youngest dean ever, daughter of immigrants, revolutionary approach to education policy. The photographer had captured me in my office, bookshelves lined with academic journals and a whiteboard covered in policy frameworks. My phone rang again. "Dad." I let it go to voicemail. It rang immediately after. "Mom." Voicemail. A text from my sister Emily, Harvard. You work at Harvard. Why didn't you say something? I typed back. I did. Multiple times. You called it still just teaching. My brother Derek called next. I answered. Are you kidding me right now? He said without preamble. Dean of Harvard? Sarah, what the hell? Good morning to you too. My entire office is talking about this. Someone sent around the Times article. Do you know how insane this is? The youngest dean in Harvard history. I'm aware. Why didn't you tell us? I took a sip of coffee. I tried to, Derek. At Thanksgiving, I mentioned I was being considered for a leadership position at my university. Dad asked if I was finally leaving teaching. When I said no, he changed the subject to your IPO. Silence. At Christmas, I mentioned my book was being published by Oxford. Mom asked if that meant I'd finally make decent money. When I tried to explain the grant I'd received, she said, "That's nice, honey," and turned to Emily to discuss her partnership track. More silence. And 2 weeks ago, Dad uninvited me from his retirement party because having a teacher daughter was embarrassing when his colleagues' children are investment bankers and tech executives. Sarah, I'm not angry, Derek. I'm just done pretending it doesn't hurt. He exhaled. He's freaking out, you know. His entire office has seen the news. Apparently, Richard Steinberg called to congratulate him on raising such an accomplished daughter. Despite myself, I smiled. Good old Richard. Dad wants to talk to you. I'm sure he does. Will you call him? Eventually. I'm busy today. I have a meeting with the president of the university, then lunch with the governor about education reform, then a lecture to give to 300 students. Jesus, Sarah. Welcome to my world, little brother. The one you all thought was grading spelling tests. I hung up and looked at my calendar. It was going to be a long day. But first, I had something to do. I pulled up my family group chat, the one I'd muted months ago after too many conversations about Emily's cases and Derek's funding rounds that somehow never included questions about my work. I typed, for those asking, yes, I work at Harvard. I have for 8 years. I was promoted to associate professor 3 years ago. My research focuses on education policy and literacy development. I've published 3 books, advised the Department of Education, and just secured a $50 million grant for national literacy programs. Last week, I was appointed Dean of the Graduate School of Education. I'll be happy to answer questions, but I have a full schedule this week. I hope Dad's party goes well. I'll send flowers. I hit send and put my phone on silent. My assistant, Jennifer, appeared in the doorway. Dr. Chen? The car is here to take you to the governor's office. Also, your father is in the lobby. He's asking to see you. I looked up, surprised. My father is here? Yes, ma'am. He says it's urgent. I checked my watch. I had 15 minutes before I needed to leave. Send him up. Dad appeared 2 minutes later, looking like he'd driven straight from Connecticut without stopping. His tie was crooked, his usually perfect hair slightly mussed. He stopped in the doorway, taking in my office. The walls lined with framed degrees: Yale undergrad, Harvard PhD. The bookshelves filled with academic journals, many with my name on the spine. The photos of me with senators, education secretaries, foundation presidents. Sarah, he said. Dad. I stood, smoothed my suit jacket. I have about 10 minutes. What can I do for you? He stepped inside, closed the door. Why didn't you tell me? I did tell you. You weren't listening. Not like this. Not Harvard. Not Dean. I sat back down, gestured for him to take a seat. He did, looking smaller somehow in the leather chair across from my desk. When I started my PhD program here, I invited you to my dissertation defense. You said you were too busy. When I got my first teaching position, I invited you to my inaugural lecture. You had a golf tournament. When my first book was published, I sent you a copy. You never mentioned it. When I won the Spencer Award, one of the highest honors in education research, I called to tell you. You said, "That's great, honey," and asked if I'd heard about Derek's Series B funding. He winced at each example. So when I was being considered for dean, I stopped trying. I figured I'd tell you at your party, let you enjoy the surprise. Then you uninvited me because my career was an embarrassment. I never said embarrassment. You said it would be difficult to explain why your daughter chose to be a schoolteacher when she graduated from Yale. You told me to pretend I was busy so your colleagues wouldn't ask questions. What would you call that, Dad? He looked down at his hands. I was wrong. Yes. Richard Steinberg called me this morning. He said, I just read about your daughter. My God, Tom, the youngest dean in Harvard history. You must be so proud. He looked up at me, and I realized I had no idea what to say. Because I didn't know. I didn't know any of it. You could have known. You chose not to ask. You're right. His voice cracked slightly. You're absolutely right. I thought I don't know what I thought. That teaching was something you'd do for a few years before getting a real job. I never took the time to understand what you were actually building. I felt my throat tighten but kept my voice steady. Do you know what I do, Dad? Really do? He shook his head. I develop frameworks that shape how millions of children learn to read. I advise policymakers on education reform. I train the people who train teachers. I've spent the last 8 years building programs that will outlive me, that will change lives. I leaned forward. And yes, I still teach. Every semester I teach one class because I never want to forget what it's like to be in front of students, to see that moment when something clicks. Teaching isn't what I do when I'm not doing important work. Teaching is the important work. He nodded slowly. I see that now. I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm so sorry. The words I'd wanted to hear for years. But they felt hollow now, built on headlines rather than understanding. I appreciate the apology, Dad. But I need you to understand something. I didn't pursue this career for recognition. I did it because I believe in it. The fact that it took a press release and phone calls from your colleagues for you to see value in my work, that tells me everything I need to know. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm going to be dean. I'm going to change policy. I'm going to teach. And you're welcome to be part of that, but only if you actually care about the work, not just the prestige. Of course I care. Do you? Or do you care that Richard Steinberg is impressed? He flinched. I have to go, I said, standing. I have a meeting with the governor. Then I'm having dinner with my department faculty, the people who showed up for my dissertation defense, who celebrated my first publication, who've supported me for 8 years. You're welcome to join us, but it's not a Wall Street crowd. It's a bunch of educators who care deeply about public policy and literacy rates. If that's embarrassing to you, then maybe it's better if you don't. He stood too. Sarah, please. Let me make this right. Then start by reading my book. It's called Transforming Literacy in America. I sent you a copy 2 years ago. It's probably still in the shrink wrap. His face told me I was right. Read it, I said. Understand what I do. Then we can talk. Jennifer knocked. Dr. Chen, the car is waiting. I grabbed my briefcase. I have to go, Dad. Show yourself out. I left him standing in my office, looking at my walls of achievements like he was seeing them for the first time. The meeting with the governor went well. She wanted my input on a statewide literacy initiative, offered resources and support. We talked for 2 hours about policy implementation, funding structures, teacher training. Real work. Important work. At dinner with my faculty, surrounded by people who'd been in the trenches with me for years, I felt myself relax. Dr. Martinez raised a glass. To our new dean, he said. We knew you'd change the world. We're just glad Harvard finally caught up. Everyone laughed. I blinked back tears. Thank you, I said. For everything. For seeing me. We always saw you, Sarah, Dr. Williams added. That's why we're here. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Your father told me what happened. I'm sorry too, sweetheart. We should have listened better. Then Emily. I read the Times profile. I had no idea you'd done all this. Can we talk? Derek, read your book. Well, started it. It's really good, sis. I'm proud of you. And finally, Dad. I bought your book. All 3 actually. I'm reading the first one tonight. I'm sorry I didn't do this sooner. I love you. I put the phone down. Dr. Martinez looked at me knowingly. Family? He asked. Yeah, they come around. Starting to. Good. But remember, you didn't need them to come around for any of this to matter. You built this. You earned this. Their recognition is nice, but it's not what makes it real. I nodded, feeling the truth of it settle in my bones. Later that night, back in my apartment in Cambridge, I made a decision. I pulled up Dad's contact and typed, "Thank you for the apology. And for buying the books. If you're serious about understanding my work, come to my lecture next Thursday. It's open to the public. I'll be discussing education policy reform. Bring Mom. Bring Emily and Derek if they want. But come because you're interested, not because you're trying to make up for lost time." He responded immediately, "We'll be there. All of us. I promise." On Thursday, I stood in front of 300 people in Harvard's largest lecture hall. I was explaining the intersection of neuroscience and literacy development when I spotted them in the back row. Dad, Mom, Emily, Derek. They'd actually come. I didn't change my lecture. I didn't simplify anything or play to the crowd. I talked about synaptic development and phonological processing, about policy implementation and funding structures. I showed data, cited research, made the case for transformative change in how we approach literacy education. When I finished, the room erupted in applause. Students mobbed me with questions. And in the back, I saw my father wiping his eyes. They waited until the crowd cleared. I packed up my materials slowly, giving them time to leave if they wanted to. They didn't. "That was incredible," Emily said, approaching first. "Sarah, I had no idea. You're changing the entire education system." "Trying to," I said. Derek shook his head. "I understood maybe half of that, but the half I got was brilliant. The stuff about early intervention and brain development. That should be everywhere. We're working on it." Mom hugged me. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm sorry we didn't see this sooner." Dad was last. He didn't say anything, just handed me a worn copy of my first book, pages flagged with sticky notes, margins filled with his handwriting. "I stayed up until 3 a.m. reading this," he said. "I have about 100 questions." I felt something in my chest crack open. "Yeah? Yeah. And I want to hear about the grant, and the policy work, and all of it, everything I missed." He paused. "If you'll let me." I looked at my family, really looked at them. They'd gotten it wrong for so long. But they were here now, trying. "Okay," I said. "But fair warning, I'm pretty passionate about this stuff. Once I start talking, it's hard to stop me." Dad smiled. "I'm counting on it." We went to dinner that night. All 5 of us. For the first time in years, the conversation centered on my work. They asked questions, real questions, not polite small talk. They wanted to understand the research, the policy implications, the real-world impact. "So when you talk about phonemic awareness," Emily said, "you're saying we're teaching reading wrong in most schools?" "Not wrong, exactly. Incomplete. We know from neuroscience that the brain needs explicit instruction in certain skills, but many schools still rely on whole language approaches that don't provide that foundation. And that's what your grant addresses. Part of it, the grant funds a pilot program in 50 districts across the country. We're training teachers, implementing evidence-based curricula, and tracking outcomes. If it works and our preliminary data suggests it will, we can scale it nationally." Derek leaned forward. "What's the ROI on something like that?" I smiled. "If we can improve literacy rates by even 5%, we're talking about millions of children with better life outcomes. Higher graduation rates, higher earning potential, lower incarceration rates. The societal return is in the billions." "Jesus," he said. "That's a better return than any startup I've funded." "Different kind of return," I said. "But yeah. That's why I do this." Dad had been quiet, listening. Finally, he spoke. "I told Richard Steinberg that you couldn't make it to my party because you had a prior commitment. I didn't tell him I'd uninvited you." I nodded. "I'd like to tell him the truth," he said. "And I'd like to invite you again. Properly this time. Not to show you off, but because I want you there. Because you're my daughter and I love you, regardless of your title or your accomplishments." I felt tears prick my eyes. "The party was 2 weeks ago, Dad." "I know. I'm thinking of having another one. A real retirement party, not a Wall Street networking event. Just family and actual friends." People who care about more than job titles and salaries. He looked at me. Will you come? I thought about the years of dismissal, the casual cruelty of being overlooked. I thought about the phone call that had uninvited me from his celebration. But I also thought about him staying up until 3 a.m. to read my book, about him filling the margins with questions, about all of them sitting in the back of my lecture hall. I'll come, I said. On one condition. Anything. You let me bring some of my faculty. The people who've been my real family for the past 8 years. The ones who showed up when I appeared to have nothing worth showing. He smiled, and for the first time in years, it reached his eyes. I'd be honored to meet them. A month later, we had that party. Not at some fancy club, but in my parents' backyard. My faculty came, and they talked education policy with Derek and litigation strategy with Emily. Dr. Martinez and my father discussed the economics of education reform for an hour. Mom asked Dr. Williams about her research on bilingual education, genuinely interested. I stood on the deck, watching my two families merge, and felt something settle in my chest. Not forgiveness, exactly. Not yet. But the possibility of it. Emily found me there. Penny, for your thoughts? Just thinking about how different this is from what I imagined. Better or worse? Different. I thought I needed their approval to feel successful. Turns out I just needed them to see me. She squeezed my hand. For what it's worth, I see you now. And I'm amazed. I looked at my sister, really looked at her. Thanks, Em. Also, I have a favor to ask. What's that? My firm is looking at education law. Specifically special education funding. I have no idea what I'm doing. Would you be willing to consult? Paid, obviously. I laughed. You want to hire me? I want to learn from you. There's a difference. And maybe that was the real shift. Not them being proud of my achievements, but them recognizing they had something to learn from my expertise. Dad approached, 2 beers in hand. He offered me one. Thank you for this, he said. For giving us another chance. You're welcome. But Dad, I need you to understand something. I didn't need Harvard to make my work valuable. I didn't need the dean title or the press coverage. Those things are nice, but they're not what makes this matter. I know that now. Do you? Because it took a New York Times headline for you to see it. He nodded slowly. You're right. And I can't undo that. But I can promise to do better going forward. I can promise to listen, to ask questions, to see you for who you are, not what your business card says. That's all I want. Then you have it. He paused. I've been thinking about what you said, about teaching being the important work. I volunteer now, at a local elementary school. Literacy tutoring. I stared at him. You do? Twice a week. Your book, the first one, talked about the importance of one-on-one intervention for struggling readers. I figured if I can't go back and be a better father, at least I can help some other kids. I felt tears on my cheeks before I realized I was crying. Dad, I have a student. Marcus. 7 years old. When we started, he couldn't recognize half the alphabet. Last week, he read his first book. The whole thing, start to finish. Dad's voice cracked, and I finally understood what you've been trying to tell me all along. This work changes lives. Not in some abstract, policy way. In a real, immediate, I can see it happening way. I hugged him then, there on the deck, while 2 families mingled below us. I'm proud of you, he whispered. Not because you're a dean. Because you're you. That night, driving home to Cambridge, I called my assistant. Jennifer, remember that interview request from PBS? For the documentary about education reform? Yes. You said you'd think about it. Let's do it. But I want to include a segment on volunteer tutoring. Specifically, I want them to film my father working with his student. Really? Really. I think it's time to show people that this work isn't just for professionals. It's for anyone who cares enough to show up. I'll set it up. I hung up and drove through the night, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. The years of being overlooked, of being dismissed, of being told my passion was just a phase. And then the vindication, the recognition, the hollow victory of finally being seen for all the wrong reasons. But maybe that wasn't the end of the story. Maybe the end was watching my father discover the same passion I'd found 15 years earlier. Maybe it was seeing my family finally understand not just what I did, but why it mattered. My phone buzzed. A text from Derek. Just made a donation to your literacy foundation. Not to show off. Because Marcus deserves to learn to read. Then Emily. Talk to my managing partner. We're taking on special ed cases pro bono. You'll consult? Mom, starting a book club. First selection, your second book. My friends can't wait to read it. And Dad, Marcus asked if you'd come read to his class sometime. I told him I'd ask. No pressure, but he's very excited about the prospect. I smiled, typing back, tell Marcus I'd be honored. As I pulled into my parking spot, I thought about the lecture I was giving next week, the policy meeting after that, the grant proposal due at the end of the month. The work continued, with or without recognition, with or without my family's approval. But having them finally see it. Having them finally understand. That was everything. Not because it validated my choices. I didn't need validation. But because it meant they were finally asking the right questions. Finally looking beyond titles and salaries to the actual impact, the actual change, the actual lives transformed. And maybe that was the real revenge. Not proving them wrong about my worth, but helping them understand what worth really meant. I walked into my apartment, sat down at my desk, and pulled up the next chapter I was writing. Not for them, for the teachers who would read it, for the policymakers who would implement it, for the children who would benefit from it, but also, maybe, for the 7-year-old boy who'd just read his first book with my father's help. That was worth more than any headline. That was worth everything.